Welcome to another exciting episode of the Insurance Untangled podcast. My name is Ben Tuyene. I'm one of the I'm one of the co-hosts of this podcast. You know, we've created this podcast and sort of dedicated it towards helping practices unwind themselves from the confusion and spider web of insurance issues that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. And so our purpose for today is to go through some insurance tips. And I have my good friend and colleague Tessina with us today, who's going to sort of chime in on a lot of insurance-related things pertaining to negotiating fees. Tessina, welcome to the program again.
Hello, thank you.
Excellent. So mostly, if you don't know, Tessina actually, she works with us. She also has a couple of other jobs too, and we're just fortunate to have her to be a part of our team. And so for today, we want to talk about the topic of negotiating PPO fees, particularly what trends are we seeing these days as professional negotiators. So, you know, we have a business called Veritas Dental Resources, and that's sort of our primary focus is helping doctors negotiate fees. And then Tessina does the same thing too for different groups, particularly a group in Utah that she and I affiliate with called Utah Dental United. So we're going to be approaching this from a professional's perspective. Like, as professional negotiators, what are we seeing? I want to start first, Tessina, with this whole idea of doctors that are going out of network, and they're going out of network at a higher rate these days. So what that's resulting in is insurance carriers trying their best to proactively raise fees here or there, or automatically giving some fee increases to some doctors, not everybody, right? And it seems like there's some profiling going on where insurance carriers may be profiling practices to figure out who's at a high risk of going out of network. I don't know how you figure that out, but I heard from an insurance executive is that's what a lot of insurance carriers are trying to do. What do you have to say, Tessina, about this whole idea that the insurance industry is very desperate to retain providers? How can we use that knowledge to affect negotiations with insurance companies?
Yeah, definitely. So I would say the misconception is that, or the thing that people are misunderstanding more, I guess is what I would say, is that the insurance companies actually need us more than we need them. Mm-hmm. And the insurance companies are banking their dollar on the fact that you believe that you need them. Right? So they're trying to confuse you in the fact that you have to have them. Patients won't come if you go out of network. And that's how they can keep their thumb on top of you, making you take the low fees and their bundling and any of their other antics, right? Mm-hmm. But once you realize and learn that the insurance company actually needs you more than we need them, then you can shift the leverage there, right? You're going to shift the tactic and you're just going to not play their games anymore. You can go out of network. You're telling them that you're not afraid to go out of network, and you're not afraid to tell their patients and their HR departments to also switch companies because of the antics that they pull. When they start losing providers and they start losing these HR groups because they're losing providers, they don't have a service to offer anymore. So they need providers. And when you start shifting this power back into the hands of the dentist, you're going to see the insurance companies open up in a big way, willing to work with you.
Yeah, game changer right there. I remember over a decade ago up in Logan, Utah, there was a company, I think they changed the name, but the last name that they went by was Benefit Administrator Solutions or something like that. And interestingly, all the doctors were signing up with them, and they got pretty much everybody or most doctors in Logan to enroll. But the sad thing is that the doctors were enrolling under really low fees. And what that did is, because most of the doctors were in network with this company, they stopped returning calls from doctors. They stopped returning calls from team members that were trying to get verification information or even appealing denied claims. And so the sad thing that you see in the trend of insurances is that they would be happy to get you enrolled, but they don't represent you. That's not where the fiduciary responsibility is. Their fiduciary are the patients, right? The HR departments and so forth. And so in this era where a lot of doctors are going out of network, exactly what Tessina said, they need you more than you need them. Keep that in mind when it comes to negotiating. So that kind of leads into the second thing, Tessina, with regards to the rate of doctors terminating these days. In the past, meaning 15, 20 plus years ago, you could threaten to terminate a contract even with Delta, and Delta would come back to try to negotiate fees. Over the last 15 to 20 years, that strategy hasn't been very effective until late, right? So can you speak to that? Does threatening to terminate, does that help, or is that something that you should consider while negotiating with insurance?
Yes, definitely. It can help. But like you said, we used to threaten it and not actually do it. And the insurance companies were very afraid to lose you because, like we said, they need you more than we need them. And so if you threaten to or to terminate, they would say, okay, let's negotiate. What do I have to do to keep you guys? And then what they started realizing is that the world became more and more insurance driven and more insurance minded, and that the offices were afraid to lose patients if they dropped. So that even if they threatened, they had learned that this was just a bluff, right? That they could just say, I'm going to drop if you don't give me higher fees. And the insurance would started testing it out and saying, no, we're not going to give you higher fees. And then how many people actually dropped that had threatened that they were going to? Not enough. Because what happened then is the insurance learned that these guys are just bluffing and they don't have to give you fees anymore. So now they've stopped negotiating. They don't care if they threaten you this for years. And now we're shifting this power control again because offices are saying, I don't care if you don't negotiate. I don't care anymore. I can't take this low fee. So now they are actually going out of network. Sometimes even if the insurance is willing to negotiate, they negotiate, they give you a $2 raise and the doctor says, it's not enough. We're done. We're out. And now the insurance companies are starting to lose their grip, lose their power and their leverage as these doctors are standing up for themselves. And I've been watching this happen. It's a beautiful thing. But these doctors are standing up for themselves and standing up for the quality of care that they want to provide for their patients. And the insurance company is losing their leverage, which is starting to turn that wave around of now they want to open those doors again to discuss this. And I talked to somebody the other day about these waves. I've been in the business a long time, Ben, so have you. We've seen these waves where they'll give you a great fee, they'll treat you really good, they want to get all these providers in network, so everybody joins the network, right? And then once they have a really heavy load of doctors, they start dropping the fees, they start denying claims, they don't take care of you anymore. And then all of these doctors get frustrated and they go out of network again. And then the insurance company says, oh no, we have to fix this. And then here we go, back and forth. What I've been seeing more recently is instead of this wave motion, that even though the insurance companies are starting to change and come back and say, okay, we'll give you higher fees. Okay, we'll pay the claims better. The doctors, instead of going back in network to play this wave game again, are actually saying, we're just going to stay out of network. It actually works really well for us. We're going to stay out of network. I'm glad to see you're paying claims better, but we're not going to join back up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. When you take away that power from the insurance, even if it's one doctor, one office, it means a great deal to the insurance company, right? Like we all fail to recognize, like voting is a great example. We've had very, very, very close elections over the last decade. I think since the history of time as we know it, sometimes a single vote could sway an election. Out of like 10,000 voters, one person could determine the outcome of an election, right? So the same thing is true when it comes to, you going out of network. Every practice that goes out of network puts a giant dent in the insurance industry's armor. And so terminating, exactly what Tessina mentioned, threatening to terminate, these days, insurance carriers are taking that a lot more seriously, mainly because when doctors terminate, most of the time they end up going out of network, right? Whereas I would say even 5 years ago, doctors would threaten to terminate and only 5% of them would actually terminate. They would accept whatever fee increase they get from the insurance company. So on that part there, give that a try. See if the threat of termination would help. What I'm finding though, is that it's not just the threat of termination that'll get you where you want to be from a negotiating perspective. You actually have to go through the process. So if you send in a termination letter or like Cigna has a specific termination form, when they get that, they are going to start the process to figure out how to retain you in the network. They're going to start looking at fee schedules to see what they can offer to sort of get you to stay, right? But at the end of the day, like what Tessina said, if they don't give you something that's satisfactory, going out of network is not the end of the world. In fact, it's far superior for most practices to be out of network. And they don't realize that. Like a lot of people that have not tried out of network, you don't really, we're leaning on the experience of others, right? But you don't really know what to expect. So it's scary. But what I will say, the data is rolling out, even in a bad economy, out of network is just fine for the vast majority that are already there. So let's talk about, Tessina, the umbrella network strategy. So for those of you that aren't familiar with the phrase umbrella network, insurance companies call them leasing networks or rental networks. Other industry experts refer to this as network stacking. So it's the idea that you're in network with one dental plan or dental network. And then underneath that network, you have multiple PPO plans that can choose to list you as in network under that fee schedule and agreement. And in the industry, we have several of those umbrella networks like Connection Dental, Dentamax, Carrington. So these days we're seeing umbrella network strategies very effective. I look at it as a stepping stone towards going out of network, because when you do those umbrella network strategies, you're going to have to go out of network with some plans before you renew them under the better fee schedule agreement, right? Tessina, what are your thoughts and ideas on umbrella network strategies? And let's take a look at two different types of practices. A practice that is out of network with most plans, like we've been seeing as of late, right? We've had a lot of doctors call their fee-for-service and they're like, hey, can you recommend a network to join, right? Or a PPO plan to join? So let's address it from that perspective. How can that be beneficial for that kind of doctor? And then secondly, let's take a look at other doctors that participate with every dental plan under the sun. And let's say they've never negotiated fees, and 90% of the PPOs that they're in network with, they could probably get a 20% increase if they move those contracts to an umbrella network. So we'll call that practice number two. Let's start with practice number one, fee for service. What's your recommendation, or what is sort of your thought process in making a recommendation for a fee for service doctor to join an umbrella network, particularly fee for service doctors that are slow and they're looking at marketing, right? Looking at opportunities to add more new patients. How can umbrella network strategies help practices like that?
Yeah, definitely. So a fee-for-service office, if they're wanting to get new patients or get more patients by adding PPOs, if they went into a whole bunch of direct contracts and negotiated directly with insurance companies, they get a whole bunch of new patients, but guess what happens to their production? They don't actually make any more production than they were making before because their write-offs are so large. In some cases, they actually wind up losing money if they associate with the wrong insurance company agreement and the patient base that brings with it. So if we are careful in adding an umbrella network that has the higher fees, that handles the quality of dentistry we like to provide, and then that automatically puts you in network with like 100 insurance plans under that one fee schedule, right? Now we're able to see all these patients. We know we've only agreed to take this 20% write-off instead of a 50% write-off. You're actually increasing your production and increasing your patient base. As you continue to educate your patients on being not insurance-minded, but focused on the quality of care that you provide, you do actually have the option later on to go back out of network with that umbrella network and retain all those patients that you had gained during that time of using the third-party company or that third-party fee schedule. So it's been really helpful for a lot of practices to boost their patient income as well as their actual production because they don't have to take a 50% write-off.
That's wonderful. One thing I'll add to that, Tessina, is what I see today in terms of the fee-for-service practices that are calling us is you see historical trends that are going 10, 15 years, 5, 10, 15 years worth of data. And these practices have been fee-for-service forever. That's just how they've been operating. But you see this decline in these practices over a 10-year period in terms of patient activity. And I think, in my opinion, that's a function of how you're positioning yourself in the community and how you're talking to people when they call in, right?
Yes.
A lot of fee-for-service practices, when insured patients come in, they don't schedule many of those patients because they themselves are driving them away, and they're saying we're not in network, right? You might have to call somebody else. the key with fee for service these days. So if you're at that end of the spectrum where you're like, no, I'm in the process of going out of network with insurance, right? I can't stand the in-network agreement. Don't neglect the new patient opportunities. Don't neglect seeing PPO patients from an out-of-network perspective, mainly because you don't want to be stuck in the bucket like 10, 15 years later, where there's a consistent decline in the practice as a result of you being out of network. So good training and good scripting will help a fee-for-service practice maintain growth throughout the entire life cycle of that doctor or practice owner. Now, with regards to umbrella network strategies, if you're going in that direction, just keep in mind that from my perspective on assessment, let's say you see MetLife on that list and you're out of network with MetLife, but you have $400,000 worth of revenue coming in from MetLife. If you were to join MetLife through the umbrella, with a 20% write-off, you could do the math on what your loss would be the first year, assuming that you didn't gain any new MetLife patients, right? And so if that write-off, like what's 20% of, sorry folks, my brain isn't working today. Normally I could do math on the fly, but simple math today, I need more sleep to be able to do that. So 400,000, 20% of that is $80,000, right? To me, for an average practice, considering that annual patient value for some practices is, we'll just use $500. So that's 160 new patients that you have to bring in to offset that. So how many years is going to take you to get those new patients, right? So this is why you have to consult with a professional on these things if you're a fee-for-service practice and looking to join PPOs, mainly because losing $80,000 to market, it would be more financially beneficial to spend $20,000 out of that 80, still stay out of network with MetLife and do some marketing, right? Or add some PPO plans if it makes sense to do so, right?
Yeah,
so I agree.
Teach the team to educate properly.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Yes. That's awesome. Any other comments on this umbrella networks before we move on to the last question, Tessina?
I don't think so.
Okay. So the last component here are tips, negotiating tips for new practice owners, those that are buying a new practice. Just your general, I know that I deal with this more in our company than anybody else, but curious, Tessina, from your perspective, what are some things from an insurance perspective that a new practice owner should look at? And a new practice owner that has never owned a practice, it doesn't have to be negotiations, but what is your recommendation on the general, like what should you look out for as a new practice owner coming into a practice, to new practice ownership?
Several things. Your software, your team, and don't take every insurance under the sun thinking that that's how you're going to build your patient base. That is probably one of the biggest places I see dentists go wrong, is they start signing up with every single insurance as quick as they can, thinking that this is how I have to hurry and get patients in, and I'm so slow and I need to get patients in really fast. And that's not the proper method, because you're going to be getting those patients in and not making money or losing money because of those write-offs that you're not paying attention to. If you're really careful and you work with a company that can help you strategically add on the right umbrella networks from the beginning and train the staff from the beginning how to educate patients and see patients out of network with some of those plans, using the right software, having that efficiency in place so that the team can be as productive and efficient as possible. Those things will set you on the right foot from the beginning, that even if you're slow in the beginning, you're on track for really big successes within the first year.
That's awesome. That's excellent. And I think what you said there's a lot of tie-ins to insurance as well. And maybe we'll save those tie-ins for another episode. If you are thinking about buying a practice and you want to hear more about new practice owner tips as it relates to insurance strategies, just send us an email. We'll post our contacts in the show notes. And that way we can kind of see what the audience wants to hear regarding to this particular topic. But quick tip on if you're looking to buy a practice, tip number one is do your insurance due diligence early. You don't want to wait to do that in last minute, mainly because if you end up needing to credential with a bunch of PPO plans and you only have 2 weeks until you close, the big question is, what is your plan? Are you going to be filing claims as an out-of-network provider? Are you going to extend the close date until you get credentialed? or is the seller going to be retained as the in-network provider for the practice until you get credentialed? There are various different options with that regard, but if you wait last minute to do the insurance due diligence, it could be a potential liability for you in the sense that if you have to bill as an out-of-network provider, being the new owner, you do tend to see a lot of patients not like that, right? So they lose all trust, in general, and they just go to another practice. Second thing is, it is very, very possible that most practice purchases of a PPO practice that takes every dental plan, that there are going to be negotiating opportunities available. Because negotiations and credentialing takes time, you need to carefully assess your timeline to make sure that you have the time to negotiate fees. I see many new practice owners lose out on $80,000, $100,000, $200,000 worth of revenue just by getting the right fee schedules for the practice. And that's on an annual basis, by the way. And you don't want to be in that category of losing revenue as a result of not getting the fees negotiated to a higher rate. So in short, prepare in advance for the transition, do that insurance due diligence early, and also assess the fees in an effort to find out if there are new opportunities for you to gain more new revenue as the new practice owner above what the seller was getting from every insurance plan that they were on. Any final thoughts in general, Tessina, about today's episode?
I don't think so. We kind of skipped over practice 2 when we were talking about umbrella networks. If you are already in network with all the PPOs and you want to use umbrella networks, how could that benefit you? Well, your direct contracts are going to have much lower fees and your umbrella networks are going to have much higher fees. So you get to have that comfort of staying in network like you're used to, but at a much higher fee schedule. So that was that tip for the number 2 office.
Yes. And thank you for reminding me about that. Yep. Simple strategy is to assess among all the plans you're in network with, which ones can use an umbrella network. And if it doesn't even make sense to make that switch from a fee schedule perspective, because some plans might have a fee schedule contract that's higher than the umbrella network, right? So retaining those contracts would make better sense. So yes. Tessina, thanks for reminding, and thank you for joining us today.
You bet.
Really appreciate it. Now, in closing, quick offering, if you're thinking about negotiating strategies, don't know where to start, we'd be totally happy to offer up a complimentary consultation for sort of as a gift for those that are listening today. Visit veritasdentalresources.com, and you can most certainly request to book a consultation with Tessina or myself, but we'd be more than happy to sort of go through and walk you through all the negotiating options that could be possibly available for you. Again, veritasdentalresources.com. or help@veritasdentalresources.com if you decide to email us. Again, thank you for joining us today on another amazing episode of the Insurance Untangled podcast. Until we meet again, have a wonderful day.